The world was silent for a moment, as if holding its breath. Elon Musk, the enigmatic billionaire, had just dropped a bombshell on his millions of followers during a live stream. Jesus is black, and I have the proof that will shock the world. The internet went wild. Twitter erupted with thousands of tweets, Facebook exploded with passionate posts, and news outlets quickly jumped on the story, interviewing experts and historians. Was it a joke? A publicity stunt? Or was there some truth to this claim that could shatter centuries of accepted knowledge? Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. Elon's voice was calm, almost too calm, as he continued. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Some laughed, dismissing it as just another Musk eccentricity. Others felt the weight of his words, wondering if this could really be true. For decades, historical records and biblical texts had painted a different picture, but now, Musk was about to challenge the entire narrative. Could it be possible that everything we had been taught about Jesus, his image, his legacy, his race, was based on centuries of misinformation? The stakes were higher than ever. It was a quiet evening, and the world was about to change forever. Elon Musk sat confidently in front of his camera, the bright lights casting shadows across his face. A soft hum of excitement lingered in the air as he adjusted his posture. The live stream was set to begin, but no one, not even Musk himself, knew that what he was about to say would set the internet on fire. He had built rockets, cars, and even dreams of colonizing Mars, but tonight, Musk was preparing to deliver the most controversial statement of his life. Jesus is black, he said, his voice steady but deliberate. And I have the proof that will shock the world. For a split second, the world seemed to hold its breath. The chat on the live stream exploded in a frenzy of comments. Some were skeptical, others were enraged, and a few simply couldn't believe their eyes. The words flashed on the screen. Did he just say that? And this can't be real. On Twitter, the hashtag #JesusIsBlack shot to the top of trending topics. News outlets scrambled to get experts on the air, while history buffs and theologians launched into heated debates. Could this really be true? Was this a joke? A publicity stunt? Or had Musk discovered something earth-shattering? Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. Musk added, his usual mix of charm and confidence still present. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? His followers, in all corners of the world, began to comment, from New York to Nairobi, from LA to London. Everyone had an opinion, and everyone was watching. This wasn't just another Musk controversy. This was something deeper, something more profound. For centuries, we had all been taught that Jesus was a figure of divinity, someone whose story transcended culture and time. The image of a man with fair skin and long hair was etched into churches, paintings, and the minds of billions. But now, here was Musk, with a claim so bold, it threatened to unravel centuries of tradition and belief. Could it be that everything we thought we knew about Jesus, the color of his skin, his identity, his very image, had been shaped by centuries of distortion? As the world buzzed with confusion and disbelief, Musk leaned back in his chair, the smallest hint of a smile crossing his lips. This may be the most important thing I ever do, he said quietly, almost to himself, and you're all here to witness it. The screen went dark for a moment as Musk paused, allowing the magnitude of his words to settle into the hearts and minds of everyone who was listening. A split second later, he clicked on a link, bringing up a series of ancient documents and faded manuscripts, proof, he claimed, of his groundbreaking discovery. Let's see what the past really says, Musk whispered. And just like that, the world was about to dive into a mystery so deep, it would change everything. Elon Musk was no stranger to controversy. From building electric cars that promised to revolutionize the automotive industry to his ambitious vision of taking humanity to Mars, he had always been a figure who dared to push the limits. But his claim about Jesus being black was something entirely different. This wasn't just a technological leap. It was a cultural and spiritual challenge that had the potential to reshape history itself. Born in Pretoria, South Africa, Musk grew up in a world that was both privileged and profoundly divided. His father, Elon Musk, was a wealthy electromechanical engineer, and his mother, Mae Musk, was a model and dietitian. Despite his family's financial comfort, Elon's childhood was far from easy. He was often bullied at school for being an awkward, introverted child. With his head buried in books, he found solace in technology and science fiction, often retreating into his imagination to escape the harsh realities of his environment. As a teenager, Musk developed an interest in computing and entrepreneurship, teaching himself programming and creating his first software, a video game called Blaster, at just 12 years old. It was around this time that his mind began to expand beyond the realms of coding and engineering. He became increasingly fascinated with the intersection of technology, philosophy, and society, ideas that would later define his path as a tech mogul. But it wasn't just his intellect that set him apart. Elon's insatiable curiosity about the world extended far beyond engineering. He was always questioning the status quo, whether it was about sustainable energy, artificial intelligence, or, now, religious history. His early experiences of feeling alienated and misunderstood seemed to fuel his desire to explore the boundaries of what was accepted as truth. In the years following his move to the United States, Musk founded companies like Zip2, PayPal, and eventually Tesla and SpaceX. Yet, while his technological achievements were groundbreaking, he never seemed content with simply disrupting industries. There was always a deeper sense of purpose behind his work, a drive to change the world in ways that went beyond rockets and electric cars, a need to challenge the norms, to push society to think differently. It was during a late-night conversation with a close friend that Musk first voiced his thoughts about the race and identity of Jesus. They were discussing history and the way it had been recorded, or, more often, misrecorded. The conversation turned to the racial implications of historical figures and the way many had been whitewashed or misrepresented. Musk, ever the skeptic, began to question how history might have shaped people's perceptions of race and identity. "Imagine if the truth was right in front of us all along," Musk had said, "but no one dared to look at it. Or maybe they just didn't want to." His friend, taken aback, laughed it off, dismissing it as another one of Musk's wild ideas. But the seed had been planted. Musk began to research, diving into biblical texts, ancient records, and historical accounts that had often been overlooked. As a man who trusted data, he knew that the truth was out there. It was just a matter of finding it. His obsession with uncovering historical truths was driven not only by curiosity, but also by a sense of responsibility. For Musk, this wasn't just about religion. It was about rewriting history to reflect a more accurate and inclusive version of the past. What would it mean for people around the world if it turned out that a figure as central to Western history as Jesus had been misrepresented for centuries? But it wasn't just about correcting the past. It was about giving people a new understanding of identity, race, and faith in the present. Elon knew that his claim would be controversial. He also knew that it could alienate him from many people. But, as he had learned through his career, the most groundbreaking ideas often came with the greatest resistance. For Musk, there was no turning back now. He had already made his announcement, and the world was watching. But what did he really have to prove his case? What evidence could possibly support such an outlandish claim? The journey to find the truth had only just begun. The moment Elon Musk dropped his bombshell, the world's response was anything but calm. The internet buzzed with conflicting opinions. Some hailed Musk as a visionary, a modern-day truth-teller who was about to reveal something that had been hidden for centuries. Others condemned him as reckless, a dangerous figure who was stirring unnecessary chaos in the name of self-promotion. The debates were immediate and intense. Religious scholars and historians across the globe scrambled to respond, and Musk's statement became a battleground for ideological warfare. Some figures within the Christian faith publicly denounced Musk, calling his claims blasphemous and irresponsible. They stood firm in the belief that Jesus, as depicted in religious art and texts, was a figure of European descent, the product of centuries of theological tradition. To challenge that image was to challenge the very foundation of their beliefs. On the other side, there were those who eagerly embraced Musk's words, seeing this as a potential breakthrough in understanding a deeper, often overlooked truth. For them, Musk's claim was not just a declaration about race, but an invitation to reconsider how history and religion had been shaped by colonialism and power structures. Among those who supported Musk was a group of progressive theologians who argued that the portrayal of Jesus as a white man was a distortion of historical and cultural realities. They pointed to the geographic and cultural context of the region where Jesus lived, Judea in the 1st century, and emphasized that Jesus would have likely had features common to people of Middle Eastern descent, including darker skin tones. These scholars, while careful not to make definitive claims, were open to the possibility that Musk might be onto something. The conflict was escalating by the hour. Social media was flooded with messages of support and outrage, and the story dominated news headlines around the world. Musk's detractors accused him of sensationalism, claiming he was using a deep-seated issue to fuel his own fame and fortune. Others speculated that Musk had an ulterior motive. Was this an attempt to distract the public from his latest business endeavors? Or was there something deeper at play? But amid the chaos, there were quieter voices, those who were not quick to take sides but were genuinely curious about the evidence Musk promised to reveal. These were the thinkers, the people who loved a good mystery, the ones who were always willing to entertain the possibility of the extraordinary. They didn't know whether Musk was right, but they were willing to listen. The weight of history was heavy, and they were wondering if Musk might truly have the key to unlock a part of it that had been long obscured. The tension built, with both sides becoming more entrenched in their beliefs. It wasn't just a matter of proving or disproving a historical claim. It was about identity, faith, and how much people were willing to challenge their own preconceived notions. For many, Musk's declaration felt like a challenge to their entire worldview. What if everything they had been taught about Jesus was wrong? Could they face that possibility, or would they shut it out entirely? As the controversy spread, religious leaders began to take more direct action. In churches across the United States and abroad, pastors preached sermons about the dangers of misinformation and the importance of sticking to tradition. Some even called for boycotts of Tesla and SpaceX, urging their congregations to withdraw support for any of Musk's ventures. Musk, however, remained unfazed. He knew what he had set in motion. The firestorm wasn't going to die down anytime soon, but he was determined to push forward. For Musk, this wasn't just about defending his claim. It was about challenging the very idea that certain truths were too sacred or untouchable to be questioned. Truth is not afraid of scrutiny, Musk had tweeted late one night. The truth will always stand, even if it's inconvenient. But as the world turned against him, Musk realized that there were even deeper, more personal stakes in this fight. The criticism was one thing. The larger challenge was the moral and spiritual weight of what he was attempting to reveal. If he was wrong, the backlash would be devastating. If he was right, he would have to face the consequences of disrupting centuries of tradition and belief. A few days after his announcement, Musk took to the live stream once more. This time, he was quieter, more serious. The weight of the moment seemed to rest on his shoulders. The public was demanding proof. He knew the evidence he had gathered was significant, but it wasn't going to be easy to convince the world, especially when so many were determined to shut him down before he even began. "I'm not doing this for attention," Musk said, looking directly into the camera. "I'm doing this because I believe history has been misrepresented. We all deserve to know the truth." The camera cut to a series of ancient documents, tattered scrolls and faded parchments, some of them written in languages few people could understand. Musk's voice continued in the background, explaining the research that had led him to these texts. He spoke about early Christian communities, lost histories, and the ways in which the image of Jesus had been adapted by various empires over time. "I didn't expect this to be easy," Musk said, his tone softer this time. "But I'm asking you to consider the possibility that what we've been taught might not be the whole story." As the live stream ended, the world held its collective breath. Musk's words hung in the air, a challenge, an invitation, and a declaration all at once. The conflict was just beginning, and Musk knew that whatever came next, it was going to be a battle for truth, identity, and the future of faith itself. Elon Musk's words had ignited an unstoppable force, a whirlwind of questions, doubts, and accusations. But for Musk, there was no turning back. The challenge he had set before the world was personal, profound, and potentially world-altering. It wasn't just about proving a point anymore. It was about a journey to uncover a hidden truth, one that had been buried for centuries. In the days following his initial announcement, Musk became more focused, more determined than ever. He had promised proof, and he wasn't about to let the noise and chaos deter him. With the weight of the world watching, he set out on what would be a journey of discovery and revelation, one that would take him deep into historical archives, ancient texts, and lost manuscripts. The first stop on his journey was the British Museum in London. The museum housed some of the oldest known biblical manuscripts, many of which had been preserved for thousands of years. Musk stood before one of the most ancient texts, a fragment of the Gospel of Thomas, and traced his fingers along the faded letters. He had spent years studying these works, but now, more than ever, they seemed to speak to him in ways he hadn't imagined before. "There's something here," Musk muttered under his breath. "Something they didn't want us to see." He wasn't just looking for proof that Jesus had been black. He was searching for the truth that had been hidden, manipulated, and suppressed throughout history. He flipped through ancient texts, comparing accounts of Jesus' life, and began to notice patterns. Passages that had long been dismissed, buried in the footnotes of history, were suddenly standing out to him. Descriptions of Jesus' appearance, his physical traits, his heritage, his very identity, had been obscured by centuries of interpretation as empires and rulers had shaped the story of Christ to fit their own agendas. Musk traveled from London to Jerusalem, where he met with local historians and religious scholars. The city was the cradle of Christianity, the place where Jesus had lived, preached, and ultimately met his fate. There, amidst the sacred sites, Musk sought to uncover any clues that might shed light on the mystery of Jesus' true identity. In the shadow of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, he walked through ancient streets, his thoughts swirling with questions. The air in Jerusalem was thick with history, every stone and corner a reminder of centuries of belief, conflict, and devotion. He spent hours with scholars, sifting through texts and artifacts, carefully analyzing any evidence that might lead him to the truth. It wasn't long before Musk stumbled upon a long-forgotten manuscript in a small library tucked away in the heart of the city. The manuscript, a collection of early Christian writings, contained a passage that had never been fully translated or studied, at least not by mainstream historians. The text described Jesus in a way that seemed entirely at odds with the typical depictions of him. It was a description not of a fair-skinned, European-looking figure, but of a man whose physical features aligned more closely with people of African descent. Musk's heart raced. He wasn't imagining things. This was it. This was the evidence he had been searching for. "This changes everything," Musk whispered as he scanned the page. The description was clear. Jesus, the man of many nations, born in the land of the East, with skin of copper and hair of wool. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. It wasn't just a passing reference. The passage clearly described a figure whose appearance matched what many would consider a black man by today's standards. And it was buried in the early writings of Christianity, never given the attention it deserved by modern historians and theologians. But even as Musk stood in awe of this discovery, doubts began to creep in. The world wasn't ready for this. Would anyone believe him? Could he convince people to see past the centuries of established belief, of ingrained imagery, of the countless depictions of Jesus as a white man? The challenge seemed insurmountable, but Musk knew there was no turning back now. The proof was in his hands, and he had to show the world. His next step was to return to his roots, back to the tech world where he had built his empire. Musk knew that to make his discovery undeniable, he needed to use the same tools of innovation and transparency that had made his companies so successful. If the world wasn't going to listen to his words alone, he would show them the evidence. He began to work with a team of experts, historians, archaeologists, linguists, and even some cryptographers who specialized in ancient texts. Together, they began to decode more of the manuscripts, analyze their authenticity, and use cutting-edge technology to verify their findings. Musk's teams worked tirelessly around the clock, employing modern technology to cross-reference ancient manuscripts with modern data. What they uncovered was astonishing: hidden references to Jesus' heritage and race that had been deliberately obscured over time. The evidence was mounting, but Musk was beginning to understand that his discovery wasn't just about racial identity. It was about the power of history itself. The way it was written, preserved, and presented shaped how the world saw itself. And if the truth about Jesus' race could be hidden, what other parts of history had been manipulated? At the same time, the world's reaction continued to intensify. Some hailed Musk's journey as a groundbreaking moment in both history and faith, while others dug in their heels, unwilling to entertain the notion that their centuries-old beliefs could be questioned. The critics were vocal, accusing Musk of stirring up unnecessary divisions and seeking attention at any cost. But for Musk, the importance of what he had uncovered far outweighed the criticism. "History has been written by the victors," he said in a follow-up live stream, his voice firm. "But now, it's time for the truth to be told. We can no longer afford to accept the narratives that have been handed down without question. It's time to see the world as it really was, and as it truly is." He wasn't just looking for historical accuracy anymore. Musk's journey had become about something much larger, a chance to give the world the power to question, to think, and to challenge the foundations of everything they had been told. As the climactic journey continued, the truth Musk had uncovered began to spread like wildfire. There was no going back. The world was ready to face the uncomfortable truths that Musk had been daring enough to reveal. The world was holding its breath. Musk had promised a truth that would shock the world, and he was now on the verge of delivering it. As the final pieces of evidence came together, the tension in the air grew thicker, and the debate around Musk's claim reached a fever pitch. For many, it felt as if the foundation of everything they knew about faith, history, and identity was being pulled from under them. The moment came one evening, when Musk sat down for a live-stream broadcast. This wasn't just another public statement. It was the culmination of everything he had been working towards, the moment when he would reveal the undeniable proof that Jesus was, in fact, a black man. The studio was dimly lit, with only Musk's face illuminated in front of a backdrop of ancient texts, historical maps, and digital projections of manuscripts. As the camera focused on him, his expression was calm but intense. It was clear that this was the most important moment of his life, one that could either solidify his place in history as a revolutionary thinker or mark him as an outcast forever. "Tonight, I'm going to show you something," Musk began, his voice steady but charged with emotion. "Something that will change everything we thought we knew about our past." The world watched as Musk flipped open a high-tech digital display, revealing the most shocking image of all, the translation of the ancient manuscript from Jerusalem, the one that had described Jesus' appearance with startling clarity. Jesus, born in Bethlehem, from the land of the East, with skin of copper and hair of wool. The translation read, accompanied by high-resolution scans of the original text. The reaction was immediate. Some gasped in disbelief, others shook their heads in defiance, and countless viewers typed frantically in the comments section, struggling to process what they were seeing. It wasn't just about Jesus' race. It was about a truth that had been hidden in plain sight for centuries. A truth that had been suppressed by those in power to maintain control, to shape narratives that fit their agenda. As Musk continued to explain the historical context, he walked the audience through the evidence. He showed how the earliest depictions of Jesus in Christian art, dating back to the 3rd and 4th centuries, had depicted him not as a white man, but as someone with features that reflected the diverse populations of the Middle East and Africa. These early Christian artists had portrayed him with darker skin tones, curly hair, and facial features common to people from the region. Over time, as European empires spread their influence, these images began to shift, with artists adopting a more European appearance for Jesus, reflecting the prevailing social and political climates of the time. This wasn't just an accident of art, Musk explained, his voice growing more impassioned. It was a deliberate transformation of who Jesus was supposed to be for political and social reasons. And now, we can see the truth that was hidden beneath all of it. The emotional impact of Musk's revelation was profound. For many viewers, it felt like a gut punch, something that shook their very understanding of not just Jesus' identity, but their own. People who had grown up with the image of a white, European Christ suddenly found themselves grappling with a different reality, one that had never been presented to them before. The backlash was immediate and intense. Religious leaders, scholars, and ordinary people alike flooded the internet with criticisms and objections. Some felt betrayed, as though their entire belief system had been undermined. For them, Jesus being black didn't just challenge the historical narrative, it challenged their faith itself. They couldn't bear to accept the idea that their religious icon, whom they had seen as the universal savior, might not look like them at all. On the other side, there were those who felt a deep sense of validation. Black communities, in particular, expressed feelings of liberation and empowerment. For so long, the image of a white Jesus had been imposed on them, used to perpetuate a system of racial inequality. To discover that Jesus might have looked like their ancestors was nothing short of revolutionary. Musk, though expecting backlash, wasn't prepared for the raw emotional reactions that followed. He had always been someone who lived by logic and reason, who prided himself on his ability to change the world through technology and innovation. But this was different. This was a moment of collective emotional reckoning, and he couldn't ignore the humanity that was now emerging in his work. As he scrolled through social media after the live stream, Musk saw the comments pouring in, some filled with anger and disbelief, others with tears of joy and relief. One comment caught his eye, from a young black woman who had written, "Thank you, Elon. For the first time, I feel like I belong in the story. Jesus wasn't just a savior for others, he was one of us." That comment hit Musk harder than he expected. It made the entire journey feel worth it. He had set out to uncover a hidden truth, but in doing so, he had inadvertently provided millions with something far more significant: a sense of inclusion, a reminder that history, and the faith it built, was far more diverse than it had been presented. Still, there were many who rejected the new narrative outright. A large portion of the Christian world, particularly those who held fast to the traditional, whitewashed image of Jesus, refused to accept Musk's evidence. To them, it was an attack on their faith, an insult to the very essence of who they believed Jesus to be. "The truth can be uncomfortable," Musk tweeted later that evening, "but it's still the truth. History has been rewritten by those who wanted to maintain control, but we're living in a time when we can write a new story." The emotional climax was both exhilarating and heartbreaking for Musk. He had revealed a truth, but the world wasn't ready to embrace it. The journey that had begun with a single, controversial statement had now set into motion a series of revelations, upheavals, and transformations that would take years, perhaps decades, to fully unfold. The debate was far from over. But Musk had made one thing abundantly clear. The story of Jesus, and the way the world had been told to see him, was now open to reevaluation. Whether the world accepted it or not, the truth had been revealed. The dust had barely settled from Musk's bombshell revelation, yet the aftermath of the emotional climax continued to unfold in ways Musk had never anticipated. The entire world, divided, confused, elated, and enraged, was still grappling with the implications of what they had seen and heard. For many, it was not just a matter of faith, but an existential crisis that challenged everything they thought they knew about race, identity, and religion. The lines were drawn, and the debate raged on. But for Musk, the storm had only begun to reveal the true depth of his discovery. Months passed since the broadcast, and while the initial outrage and excitement had calmed, the ripple effects of his words were now deeply embedded in the global conversation. News outlets, social media, academic forums, and religious circles were consumed by the implications of Musk's discovery. His critics continued to denounce him, but Musk had learned something profound through the experience: that challenging the status quo often invited resistance, but it was also the catalyst for change. And change, he believed, was the ultimate goal. One evening, Musk sat in his office at SpaceX, staring at the illuminated screen in front of him. The debate had gone from contentious arguments to a series of reflective discussions on the meaning of history, faith, and identity. He was no longer just a tech mogul or an eccentric billionaire. He had become a cultural lightning rod, a figure who had ignited a movement that transcended technology. This wasn't just about cars or rockets anymore. It was about rewriting history. His mind wandered to a conversation he had with his closest advisors just a week earlier. A meeting that had started with strategic plans for his various companies had shifted unexpectedly into a discussion about the future of his work in the context of this new, controversial claim. "You know, Elon," one advisor had said, his voice heavy with thought, You've sparked a revolution in the way people think about race, religion, and history. But do you really understand what this means for you? Musk paused, his fingers tapping lightly on the table. I'm just showing the truth. The world isn't ready for it, but that's not my problem. My problem is ensuring that the conversation continues in a way that allows people to think for themselves, to ask questions, and to open their minds. But the world isn't going to let you off easy for this, his advisor added. You've challenged centuries of belief. You've altered something foundational for millions of people. Musk leaned back in his chair, staring out of his window into the night sky. The stars beckoned, as they always had. His journey had started with questions about the future, about technology, about pushing humanity forward. But somewhere along the way, it had evolved into a personal quest for truth. A truth that wasn't confined to the physical world, but that transcended it into the realm of the human spirit. I never expected this level of pushback, Musk said quietly, but I guess in a way, I've always been preparing for it. This is just like anything else I've faced in my life. The first manned mission to Mars, the electric car revolution. People were against it, doubted it, tried to stop it, but it had to happen, and it did. This analogy struck a chord with him, as he realized that the obstacles he faced in the world of technology and space exploration were not so different from the obstacles he was facing now in the world of faith and history. All revolutions, whether in science or culture, encountered resistance. But they also created opportunity, the opportunity to change how we see ourselves and our place in the world. As the reflection settled, Musk realized that it was time to take the next step. The world was now aware of the truth he had uncovered, but that was only the beginning. What came next was the true test of this journey: to build bridges, to spark open dialogue, and to foster understanding across the divided factions. The next phase wasn't about making people believe the truth he had found. It was about giving them the space to come to their own conclusions, to explore the complexities of history, faith, and identity without the confines of what had been dictated to them. His role was to show the door, but it was up to each individual to decide whether to walk through it. But Musk also knew that there were real-world consequences for such a deep, disruptive truth. As the discussions surrounding Jesus' true identity continued, the most vocal opposition came from the most entrenched power structures, those who had historically controlled the narrative. Religious institutions, political factions, and influential scholars rallied against the idea of Jesus being depicted in a way that challenged centuries of tradition. The traditional portrayal of Christ was a symbol not just of faith but of power, and many could not bear the idea of letting that power slip away. Musk, aware of the societal rifts his claim had caused, found himself at the center of both historical scholarship and intense political discourse. He was invited to speak at conferences, religious debates, and universities across the world. But instead of focusing on the controversy, Musk decided to approach these opportunities with one goal in mind: fostering deeper conversations, not just about Jesus' identity, but about truth itself. What did it mean to rewrite history? What did it mean for people to question everything they had been taught? And as Musk traveled the world, across Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, he encountered a variety of reactions. In some places, he was hailed as a visionary. In others, he was met with fierce resistance. But everywhere he went, one thing became clear: his journey had begun something far larger than he had imagined. It was about the way humans came to understand their collective past, their faith, and their identity. It was also about healing the deep divides that separated people based on race, religion, and history. Musk saw that in many ways, his claim about Jesus was symbolic of a much larger struggle: the fight for racial and cultural equality. If the history of the world had been rewritten to reflect a more inclusive truth, perhaps the world itself could become a more inclusive place. Late one evening, as Musk stood at the window of his private jet, watching the lights of the cities below, he reflected on what he had set in motion. The road ahead was uncertain. His claim would never be universally accepted, and the fight for truth would never end. But what mattered was that the journey had begun. Sometimes, the truth isn't easy to hear, Musk whispered to himself, but it's always worth finding. And with that thought, he looked out at the horizon, where the future lay waiting, uncertain but full of possibility. Elon Musk's claim about the identity of Jesus had sparked a wildfire of conversation across the globe. What had started as a single, controversial broadcast had evolved into a massive global movement. The ripple effects were far-reaching, touching not only religious and academic communities, but also cultural, political, and social spheres. Musk had unknowingly ignited a firestorm of change that would reshape not just the world's perception of Jesus, but the way people thought about race, identity, and the power of belief. The media frenzy had taken on a life of its own. News outlets from around the world were covering the story nonstop, with debates raging from the highest levels of academia to the dinner tables of everyday people. Talk shows, social media platforms, and podcasts were all consumed with the question, was Elon Musk right? Was the true image of Jesus truly that of a black man? And if so, what did it mean for centuries of religious tradition? For Musk, the global attention was both exhilarating and exhausting. Every interview, every public appearance, brought with it the weight of expectation. Critics called him a heretic, a manipulator of history. Others praised him as a modern-day prophet, a revolutionary who had dared to uncover the truth hidden by those who sought to maintain control. The responses were overwhelmingly polarized. Yet, Musk felt more committed than ever to pushing the conversation forward. As the months passed, Musk began to witness the more profound effects of his claim on society. Across the globe, Black communities, in particular, began to reclaim a sense of identity and pride. Church services were held where the new depiction of Jesus was front and center, with portraits of a Black Christ adorning the walls of sanctuaries. Many found solace in seeing Jesus represented in a way that resonated with their own experiences and heritage. It wasn't just about race. It was about belonging, about finally seeing themselves reflected in the religious stories that had always seemed distant. Yet, there were still many who resisted. The traditional power structures, particularly within the Catholic Church and other prominent Christian institutions, doubled down on their rejection of Musk's claim. They publicly denounced the findings, labeling them as heresy. Religious leaders in some parts of the world even attempted to suppress the narrative, urging their congregations to remain steadfast in their beliefs. But the resistance wasn't limited to religious figures alone. Politicians, particularly those who had built careers on maintaining the status quo, criticized Musk for creating unnecessary division. They argued that his statements were fueling an already volatile cultural climate, exacerbating racial tensions that had been simmering for years. "This is not the time for historical revisionism," one senator remarked during a heated interview. "The country is divided enough as it is without stirring up these divisive issues." Musk, however, wasn't deterred. He knew the path he was walking was fraught with challenges, but he believed in the long-term importance of the truth he had uncovered. He continued to promote open dialogue, traveling to universities, religious institutions, and conferences, not to defend his claim, but to encourage people to ask their own questions about history and identity. The conversation wasn't about him anymore. It was about the world rethinking what they had always known. In the heart of the controversy, Musk realized that the ultimate goal of his work wasn't to get everyone to agree with him. It was to force the world to confront uncomfortable truths, to break down the walls of long-held assumptions, and to create space for a new narrative, one that acknowledged the full diversity of the human experience. Despite the tensions, there was an undeniable shift in the way people thought about history. In academic circles, scholars began to revisit centuries-old texts and historical records that had long been dismissed or ignored. New interpretations of ancient scriptures emerged, and more research was dedicated to uncovering the truth about Jesus' identity. Universities in both the Western world and the Middle East opened their doors to new conversations about the historical context of early Christianity, examining how race, culture, and geography shaped the figure of Jesus. For many, this was a painful process, but for others, it was liberating. People from all walks of life began to understand that their identity was not defined by the narrow confines of the historical narratives handed down to them. Rather, it was shaped by the stories they chose to believe, by the truths they were willing to accept, no matter how challenging. Meanwhile, Musk's own reflections on the impact of his claim began to take on a more personal tone. In private moments, he found himself contemplating the deeper philosophical questions that his discovery had raised. What did it mean to challenge long-held beliefs? What responsibility did he have in shaping how the world understood its own history? And, perhaps most importantly, what did it mean for him, personally, to be the one to open this door to a new way of thinking? He had always prided himself on being a forward-thinking, logic-driven individual, unafraid to disrupt the status quo. But this was different. This wasn't about building a better electric car or launching a new rocket into space. This was about the very fabric of society itself. The core beliefs that had shaped generations of people, the stories they told themselves about who they were and where they came from. One afternoon, as Musk sat in his office at SpaceX, looking over the latest data from his various ventures, he paused. A thought lingered in his mind, something that had been quietly stirring for months. What if we've been wrong all along? He whispered to himself. What if our understanding of history is just one version of the story?
The thought wasn't new, but it had never felt more profound. The entire world was caught in a web of competing narratives, each one shaping the course of history in its own way. Yet, the truth had always been multifaceted, and perhaps, Musk realized, the beauty of it lay in the very act of questioning, of challenging assumptions and embracing new possibilities. The world was not static. Neither was history. And with that realization, Musk felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility, not just as a businessman or an inventor, but as a catalyst for change, a change that would extend far beyond his own lifetime. As he walked out onto the balcony of his office, the California sun setting on the horizon, Musk thought of the future. It was unclear, unpredictable, and filled with challenges. But it was also filled with potential. The world had been forced to confront its own history. And in doing so, it had opened the door to a new era, one where the truth, no matter how uncomfortable, was always worth seeking. As the global storm surrounding Musk's revelation showed no signs of slowing, a new chapter in his life, and in the collective cultural narrative, began to unfold. The world was not only reeling from his declaration, but it was also beginning to adapt to its implications. Some embraced it as a long-overdue truth, while others dug their heels in deeper, clinging to the narratives they had known for centuries. Musk's presence on the world stage had now evolved into something more profound. He wasn't simply the eccentric billionaire or the tech visionary, he had become a symbol of change, of challenging convention. As the months went by, Musk realized that his journey was no longer just about himself or even just about the historical accuracy of Jesus' identity, it was about something larger than all of them. His claim had begun to spark debates in places that Musk had never anticipated. The conversation was now happening at the intersection of race, religion, power, and history. Universities held symposiums, scholars pored over ancient texts with fresh eyes, and everyday people debated with one another in cafes, on social media, and in the streets. History had become fluid, something to be questioned and re-examined, not just a fixed story of the past, but an ongoing narrative that could shift, evolve, and grow. But as Musk became more entwined in this cultural shift, he also realized that his claim had consequences beyond the intellectual debate. Political and religious leaders began to feel the heat. There were mounting protests and petitions from organizations calling for censorship, accusing Musk of inciting chaos. Some conservative religious groups, especially those with a large following, began to label him a threat to their faith and institutions. They accused him of undermining the foundations of Christianity and called for him to retract his statements. Yet, Musk had long since decided that he would not back down. He didn't believe in hiding behind comfort or convenience, and the global reaction had shown him that the world had been waiting for someone to challenge the accepted narratives. The time for such a challenge had arrived, and Musk was determined to see it through, no matter the personal costs. One evening, while Musk sat at a table in his sprawling Palo Alto estate, reflecting on his journey, he received an unexpected call. The voice on the other end was familiar but unexpected. It was that of Dr. Evelyn Harrison, a historian and one of the leading scholars in the field of religious studies. "Elon," she began, her voice steady but urgent, "I think we need to meet. What you've done has opened doors that no one thought could be opened. I'm not sure if you fully understand the consequences of your actions, but I believe we may be at a tipping point in history. Musk felt a mixture of curiosity and wariness. He had heard from various academic and religious figures before, but this felt different. "What do you mean?" he asked, his tone calm but inquisitive. "I believe that, just as you've discovered the truth about Jesus' identity, we're on the brink of uncovering more truths, things about the early history of Christianity, about the stories we've been told for millennia. Your claim may be just the beginning of an entirely new understanding of religious history, one that challenges the very foundations of how we view the past." Musk leaned forward, intrigued. "So you're saying that what I've uncovered could lead to more revelations?" "Exactly. We've only scratched the surface. And the truth could be even more complex than we ever imagined." Dr. Harrison's words hit Musk like a sudden realization. He had always known that his discovery was significant, but hearing it from someone as respected in her field as Harrison made him understand the true weight of what he had done. This wasn't just about one claim, it was about reshaping the entire framework through which humanity understood its religious and cultural past. But there was also a darker side to this newfound knowledge. Musk knew that the deeper they dug, the more resistance they would face. The world wasn't ready to be shaken from its foundations, not just the foundations of religion, but the foundations of power and control. Challenging centuries of established thought was not something that could be done lightly, and Musk now found himself at the forefront of this global battle for truth. Dr. Harrison continued, "There are forces out there who will try to suppress what you've uncovered, Elon. You've opened Pandora's box, and now, you have to decide how far you're willing to go to let the truth out." Musk paused, contemplating her words. He knew the path ahead would be fraught with danger, not just for him, but for those who sought the truth. Yet, he felt an unwavering conviction that this was the right thing to do. History needed to be rewritten, not just to reflect a more inclusive and honest portrayal of Jesus, but to challenge the oppressive forces that had twisted it for centuries. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Musk and Dr. Harrison began collaborating on a project that would bring together scholars, theologians, and historians from around the world to further explore the new interpretations of early Christian history. They worked tirelessly to publish papers, organize symposiums, and conduct deep dives into archaeological evidence that had been ignored or dismissed for centuries. But as they pushed forward with their work, the opposition became fiercer. Religious leaders from all over the world, particularly from influential sects within Christianity, began to unite against Musk's movement. They painted him as a disruptor of faith, a danger to the sanctity of the Church. The backlash was fierce, and threats against Musk and those who supported him began to escalate. Despite the mounting pressure, Musk remained resolute. He knew that if he stopped now, if he let the weight of the opposition crush him, it would be a victory for those who sought to maintain the status quo. His mission was bigger than himself. It was about truth, about the future of humanity's understanding of its past. One evening, after a long day of meetings and interviews, Musk stood alone in his office, staring out at the horizon. The sky was painted with the colors of dusk, and for the first time in months, he felt a sense of peace. The road ahead was uncertain, but he knew he had made the right choice. The world was changing, and he was helping to change it. The time for hiding from the truth was over. The time for rewriting history was now. The global conversation had reached a boiling point. Elon Musk had long since become a symbol of change, his name synonymous with disruption. But now, more than ever, he felt the heavy burden of responsibility that came with challenging history itself. The controversy surrounding his claim that Jesus was black had evolved from a divisive social issue to a full-blown movement, a cultural force that was altering the way people viewed themselves, their faith, and their world. For Musk, however, the stakes had risen even higher. He had not only unearthed a powerful new understanding of religious history, but he had also discovered something that could reshape humanity's understanding of existence itself. In the weeks since he had made his claim, Musk had begun working closely with Dr. Evelyn Harrison, a leading historian, and several other experts to dig deeper into the forgotten, buried truths of ancient texts and artifacts. What they had uncovered was nothing short of earth-shattering. The team had uncovered new evidence in the form of previously ignored or misunderstood ancient scrolls, some dating back to the early days of Christianity itself. These texts, some of which had been preserved in hidden libraries and monasteries, contained information that radically altered the historical narrative of early Christian teachings. While the core teachings of love, compassion, and unity remained, the identity of Jesus had been significantly obscured over time, altered by political and theological powers seeking to maintain their own control over the masses. Musk and Harrison had come to the stunning realization that the identity of Jesus, and the history of early Christianity, had been meticulously manipulated. These new documents revealed that Jesus had not only been depicted as a black man, but the very structure of early Christianity had been much more inclusive, diverse, and progressive than it was often portrayed in the modern day. "What we found changes everything," Harrison said in a quiet, almost reverent tone, as they pored over the texts late one evening in Musk's private research facility. "This isn't just about race. This is about power, and how the power structures of the world have used religion to control and divide." Musk leaned over the table, absorbed in the texts. "So, what does this mean for the world now? What does this mean for the Church, for our beliefs, for how we understand Jesus?" Dr. Harrison sighed deeply. "It means we can no longer take everything we've been told at face value. The foundation of the world's largest religion has been built upon a distorted narrative, one that has been shaped by empire and influence, rather than truth. The stories we've been handed are not entirely false, but they are incomplete. And in their incompleteness, they've allowed for centuries of oppression, racism, and division." For a moment, Musk stood still, letting the enormity of Harrison's words sink in. The ramifications were overwhelming. This wasn't just about a moment of revelation, this was about rewriting the course of history. Could the world handle such a profound shift in understanding? Could the foundations of society, the very structures of religion, government, and cultural identity, survive this kind of revelation? The answer, he knew, was both yes and no. The world would change. The question was whether the change would be for the better. The next few days were filled with non-stop work, as Musk and Harrison finalized their findings and prepared to share them with the world. The media outlets were already hungry for the next installment of the story, but Musk knew that what they had discovered was not just another shocking claim, it was a new truth, one that demanded attention and respect. The moment arrived when Musk stood before the cameras once again. This time, however, he was no longer simply defending a controversial idea. He was sharing something far more profound, a revelation that could change the course of history. The world was watching. "Ladies and gentlemen," Musk began, his voice steady but filled with intensity. "What we've uncovered is not just a historical fact, it is a message. A message that has been buried for too long, a message that has been obscured by those who sought to control history for their own gain." He paused, letting the weight of his words hang in the air. The room was silent. "We have uncovered evidence that redefines who Jesus was. Jesus was not just a man from Nazareth, he was a man of color, a man who challenged the status quo in ways that have been hidden from us for centuries. The identity of Jesus was deliberately altered to fit the mold of a power structure that sought to dominate and control. But the truth is, Jesus was not just a symbol for the oppressed, he was one of them." The room erupted in murmurs and gasps. Musk's words, so simple and so direct, carried the weight of centuries of injustice. And yet, in that moment, something powerful began to stir in the hearts of millions. "This isn't just a matter of race," Musk continued, his voice growing more passionate. "It's about rewriting history, about reclaiming our understanding of what it means to be human. It's about acknowledging that the truth has been hidden from us, and it's time for all of us to see it. To understand it." As Musk spoke, the world was already reacting. Social media exploded with reactions, both positive and negative. News outlets picked up the story in every corner of the globe. The hashtag Jesus was Black began trending worldwide, as people from all walks of life debated the implications of Musk's claims. Church leaders were quick to respond. Some embraced the new revelation, seeing it as a long overdue correction to a distorted narrative, while others rejected it outright, calling it heresy. But despite the division, something deeper was happening. People were talking. They were questioning. They were reflecting on the stories they had always been told, and the possibility that those stories might need to be rewritten. The days and weeks that followed were filled with intense discussion. Universities organized panels, public debates, and symposiums on the findings. More books were published, more documentaries made, and more people began to engage with the idea that the history of Christianity, and the world, had been incomplete, distorted, and manipulated. For Musk, the path ahead was uncertain. The road to truth had always been filled with obstacles, but now, it was wider than ever. The backlash from religious and political powers was relentless, but Musk found solace in knowing that the truth was no longer something that could be ignored. He had changed the conversation. He had opened the door to a new world of understanding, one where the past no longer held dominion over the present. And as he stood on the precipice of this new era, Musk realized that the most profound revelation of all wasn't about Jesus, it was about humanity's capacity for change. The truth had set them free. But the journey was only just beginning.